Hi, this is Mark at learnhowtogarden.com. In today's episode of the 10-Minute Gardener, we're going to be talking about the most popular greenhouse vegetable that we grow. We call it a vegetable, but actually it's a fruit, and it's the tomato. It's one that the majority of us love. It's the one that more of us like to grow. I think it's one of those things, picking your own tomatoes is just such a brilliant thing you can do. So what we're going to cover in today's episode is why we should grow our own, why they're so much tastier when you grow your own, even if they have the same name as the ones that you buy in your supermarket, the varieties that I've found over the years work best for me, where to get seeds and plants of tomatoes, and we're going to cover in this episode sowing them, getting them in the propagator, and we're going to talk a bit about how we're going to grow them on once they're propagated. These are some tomatoes that I picked up today from our local supermarket. There's a much bigger variety than there ever used to be, but still not very good. This is what we call a plum tomato. Plum tomato is the shape. They tend to be long and thin. They've got less water in them, thicker walls. They tend to be brilliant for making tomato sauces. They're great in cooking. They're the backbone of most of your tomato cooking. This is an Italian variety, the classic Italian variety most people would say, San Marzano. I don't grow this one, I grow a different plum, but it is quite tasty. This is a fairly recent addition to what we've seen. This is a yellow, this is a yellow or orange tomato. Again, can be quite sweet, quite nice taste. This is what's called a mini plum. As you can see, it's quite small. You're better off trying to stick to the yellow or orange varieties if you have arthritis. The red ones can sort of play up a bit more with your arthritis. And then this is what most of us would class as the classic cherry tomato. Small, quite tiny compared to a lot that we used to know as children and grow, and on the vine. I think on the vine is one of those classic things that we all buy these thinking they'll taste better because they're on the vine. In fact, the main reason for selling them to you and I on the vine is that you could pick these 6 tomatoes in one go commercially, whereas you'd have to pick 6 of these individually or 6 of these individually. Therefore, it's a cost issue. It's much cheaper to pick them on the vine and package them. I think we have to understand that there are probably 10,000 varieties of tomatoes available. They come and go every year. Most of the breeding in tomatoes is to satisfy commercial needs, and the first of these commercial needs is that tomatoes will ripen evenly, so they all look red or orange at the same time in the shops. They will have been bred with thicker and thicker skins, and that's so that they don't split in transport, they don't damage on the shelves, they're a bit roughy-toughier, for want of a better word. Again, we don't want thick skins particularly when we're growing them, because we're more concerned with taste. We want the whole, commercially, we want all of the vine to ripen at once so we can pick it as a vine. When we are growing them in our greenhouses or outside, we can afford to pick one off each plant as we go along. So if we go back to the original concept of the 10-minute gardener, taste is the main thing. I wouldn't personally grow any of these tomatoes purely for taste. I think there are much, much better varieties out there that we could grow, and I think tomatoes are one of those things where you are without doubt much better off sourcing them from a specialist. When I say a specialist, what I'm talking about is there are companies, there are people who, for them the tomato is one of the most important seeds that they produce. I've found over the years that they will carry a much, much bigger range. In your average garden centre, you're probably looking at, let's say, 7-8 varieties of tomato that you can buy. When they get tomato plants in, you're probably looking at 3-4 varieties of tomatoes that you can buy. You could be looking at as many as 40, perhaps 50 different varieties. And those specialists will have chosen these out of that 10,000 for very specific reasons. Now, I, for my tomatoes, tend to use one of 3 companies really. The first I've used for sort of years are Simpson Seeds. These are brilliant. What I love about Matt Simpson and his seed company is that when you get a packet of Simpson Seeds, you're not paying for really, posh photography and expensive printing. They are brilliant value for money, Simpson Seeds. And from them, this year we're going to grow Chiquita, which is a small plum. It's a small bush plum tomato, which means we won't have to do any work. Quite easy. Once we get it in the ground, it will grow just like a bush. And that will be for eating in the summer in the salads. We're going to grow Rudolph, which is a plum tomato. We were talking about plum tomatoes. It'll probably be about this size, a medium plum. Again, chosen for its taste. Green Zebra. Now this is a tomato that when you see it will be like nothing you'll see in the shops. It's sort of got green and orangey stripes on it. It doesn't look like it would taste of anything. In my household there's always an argument which is the best tasting tomato. My wife comes down very firmly on the side of Green Zebra, and I would be in serious trouble if we didn't have 1 or 2 plants of that in the greenhouse. And last but not least, Black Plum. Black Plum is my personal favourite as an eating tomato. It's not the best tasting tomato if we just pick it off the plant, but it seems to undergo a magic transformation when you turn it into a sauce. It really is aromatic. It's beautiful. And when we in the summer are showing you how to make basic tomato sauces on our recipe page, which there is a link to, then you'll be able to sort of, well, you won't be able to taste it obviously, but you'll have to trust me and sort of go from the expression on my face as to how good this can make a sauce. This year we're trying 2 new ones from the Real Seed Company. These are again a company that I really like. Pointy Heart and larger Dr. Caroline Pink. These are both large tomatoes. The advantage with large tomatoes is you do tend to get some really intense flavours with the larger tomatoes. They can be as big as your fist, you know, the big Amish tomatoes are. You might only get 6 or 8 on a plant, but it is worth it. You know, we are growing these so that each of the meals we have with these tomatoes is special in itself. We don't need to produce, 2 bucketfuls of tomatoes on one day in August to sell within 7 days in the supermarket. We want a summer of experiences tasting these, and tomatoes have varying flavours throughout them, and I recommend that you grow some of these varieties. We're now going to go through how to sow tomato seeds. So your tomatoes are going to arrive in a tiny little packet. We've reconstituted some Jiffy 7s. If you want to know what Jiffy 7s are or what reconstituting Jiffy 7s consists of, please look at our episode on growing media. We take our dibber. I've talked as well in one of the previous episodes about dibbers. This is one of my favourite tools. This was handmade out of a fallen down tree in Cornwall, and I just love the feel of it. And what we're going to do is take our Jiffy 7s and just very gently create an indentation in the top. Now you'll see why I said unless you are going to grow quite a lot of tomatoes, you might be better buying them off as plants. In this tiny packet of tomatoes we have, I'd guess, approximately a dozen seeds. They're very fine, they're quite fiddly. I probably should put my glasses on for this, a sign of age. 3, 6, actually we've got more than that, 3, 6, 9, 12, gosh, 18. So from this packet, with bad germination, we're probably going to get 10 to 12 plants, which that's great if you've got a big greenhouse, but if you've got a small greenhouse, a 10 by 6 greenhouse as we've got in our 10-minute garden, do we really want all the same tomato? Surely the joy of growing your own is to have different tastes. I mean, some of these are going to go into the 10-minute garden and some are going to go into the polytunnel in our allotment garden, which is covered in Learn How to Garden, which is, they won't go to waste, trust me. So basically you just take a seed and drop it very gently with your fingers into the indentation we've made in the top of this Jiffy 7. You have to excuse the state of my fingers. Never trust a gardener who's got perfectly manicured hands. my granddad always used to say. As I've said before, most of my knowledge was passed down to me by both my grandfathers, who were great gardeners, and my great uncle, who was a professional gardener. So we pop these in, gently press them down, and then we're going to put some vermiculite. Vermiculite is, we'll pop those in a second. Vermiculite is a media we use for seed sowing. I will get some in a second, some very fine vermiculite. It'll keep the seed nicely damp but not wet. If the seeds get wet, they'll rot off. And that's all there is to it. The other thing I would say though is write a proper tag out. This says Tom for tomato and the date that we're planting it. You'll find on these you haven't got enough room to write everything, so just sort of, you know, with this one, for instance, as opposed to trying to get forwards here, it just says large and then the letters. With these tags, always do them before you start to plant, or if you're anything like me, what will happen is you'll get so into the planting, you'll end up with loads of it done and none of these tags. A quick tip about these tags, because they're, you know, they're not expensive, but we're all trying to do a bit to sort of save the planet and not waste things, and they will last more than 1 year. The easiest way to get all this writing off at the end of the year is you take them and literally pop them into a jam jar with some bleach in. If anybody can hear that, excuse that, that's Pandora. That's one of my English pointers who's making a noise. She's quite keen on tomatoes. In fact, she has been known to eat them raw. So that will go with these seeds in their Jiffy 7s into the propagator. The propagator has been set at 25 degrees. The propagator was switched on, the propagator was switched on a couple of weeks ago, but if you are switching on your propagator, make sure the propagator's had about 24 hours to get up to temperature before you put them in.